พะวงหลงเฝ้าสาวเจ้าบางประกงทางไว้งงหลงเกอหา
Welcome to the underground, you rebel scum. You're listening to The American Expat, and it's Friday. At least it is when I'm recording this. I'm not sure what day it is when you're watching the video, but that means that it's story time. So today, because of some requests that I got in the chat, I'm going to be talking about the time that I spent in California, what I was doing there. Now, I've been a lot of things in my life. Many of you know that I spent a lot of time as an expat, but I've also been a cook in a restaurant. I've worked in a warehouse driving a forklift. I've been a teacher. I've been a lot of things. But probably the most impactful thing that I've ever done in my life that has had the greatest influence over everything that came after it was 2 years that I spent as a minister for a church. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. That's what I was doing in California. So get your favorite cold drink, crack it open, have a seat, and stick around because we're going to be talking more about that here in just a second. Thanks for sticking with us. Now, before I get too far into this story, as always, I do need to do a little bit of self-promotion. Now, I'm not saying to hit the like button right now, but do keep it in mind as I go through the video, and if you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and give it your mark of approval by hitting the thumbs up button. Also, if you don't want to miss out on future videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and hopefully it'll let you know when new videos come out. If it doesn't, just remember that every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, that's 6 p.m. New York time for those of you not in the United States, I will be uploading a video, or at least doing my very best, assuming that the internet works. It seems to work pretty well here, but also, if you would like to ask me a question about anything related to China or whatever you happen to hear in a video or something that's going on that you just want to hear my take on, you can also send me an email. I check it on a regular basis. Just go ahead and send me an email at theamericanexpat76@gmail.com. That's theamericanexpat76@gmail.com. And now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump into all of this story. So, to give some background, I grew up in a certain church, and my family was very religious, and I knew that at a certain time in my life I would end up going on what we called a mission. It's not something where you choose where you want to go or anything like that, but just to give some background, before I went on this mission, so I graduated high school in 2002, and at the time I was what you might call a gamer. I was into playing video games of all kind. I think the most popular one at the time was Diablo 2. I played Halo, you name it, whatever, I was on there. Shenmue, that's a fun game still to this day. I don't have much time to play video games anymore, but you can imagine that's what I did. If you can imagine like the typical nerd living in the basement, which is exactly where my room happened to be, was in the basement, playing video games in his parents' basement, that was me in 2002, watching anime, all of this stuff, anything you can think of. Anyway, the next year after graduating from high school, turned 19, and that is the year when you get to go on this mission as part of this church. So I filled out the paperwork, and I sent it in to the church in Salt Lake City, Utah, and eventually I got a letter back. And I opened it up excitedly, saying where on earth they were going to send me, and I looked at it, and it said I'd been called to the California Long Beach mission. And I had no idea, I'm thinking like that's it in the States. A lot of people end up getting sent to different countries and that sort of thing, and that sounded exciting, but me being me, I never really did much. I never really went anywhere before this. California was adventurous enough, and little did I know California would end up being more adventurous than I could ever imagine. I would encounter more cultures and more things there than I would have probably if I'd have gone anywhere else. So anyway, yes, I got called to this mission to go to California. And that meant that very shortly after that, I would have to go do some short training. Now, the most important thing to remember about this period in my life was that I really believed in this religion. Absolutely believed in it, wholeheartedly, everything about it. So I took this mission very seriously. I was going to spread the word of God. And Yeah, so I went and I studied at this place for a couple of weeks. There's only a couple of weeks. It's more like a crash course, before they throw you to the wolves. And that's pretty much what it was like. And I, at the time, was not a people person. I was not the kind of person that gets up in front of people and speaks or goes and seeks them out, trying to tell them, hey, do you have a minute so that I can share a message about, Jesus Christ or something? And that wasn't me. But I was going to have to be that person. And like I said, I really believed in this thing, so I was going to do it because I believed wholeheartedly that I was on the Lord's errand and whatnot. So I go and they send me to California, and the first thing that happens is I end up going to, the mission home, they call it. It's where the mission president, who's the guy in charge of all these 19-year-olds that are going around. You've probably seen them riding on bikes or whatnot. They've got the black name tag, and they come and knock on your door and ask if you have a few minutes to listen to a message about Jesus Christ. So I go to this place, and this is where we're supposed to meet the person that's going to train us. They're our first companion, they call it. The companion, I know that to some people sounds a little bit strange, but think of it as your partner. And this person, you cannot leave their side for almost any reason. So this is the person you're going to be with. As long as you're assigned to this area, you're going to be stuck to this person. So I'm going to meet the first person that's supposed to train me and teach me all the ins and outs about being a missionary, and doing this kind of work. And there's a group of them, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, man, I wonder which one. There's tall ones, there's thin ones, fat ones, and there's one little guy that was a Cambodian guy. He was little. I say he's little. He's short, but he was like, really, really built. You'd have to meet this guy. And I say Cambodian, he's American. But anyway, that was who I ended up being assigned to. And, me coming from rural Virginia, I came from a little town of like 250 people. Now, it's near Washington, D.C., and I'd spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. Whenever family came, you go and you... But that was about my only real experiences with big city. So going to California already was kind of overwhelming because there's people everywhere. But anyway, I'd also not really had much interaction with anyone outside of my own ethnicity, really. So, this was very new to me. I wasn't racist or anything or against it. It was just, I don't know what to expect at this point. So I get assigned to this person, and wouldn't you know it, my first area is one of the worst ghettos you can ever imagine. And he didn't do much. I think he was having fun with me, He's a really good guy. I still talk to him from time to time. But anyway, we're assigned to this place. And the first day after we get out of this mission home, he's like, okay, well, it's time to get to work. And I've never done this before. So we go along, and we're in this place, and he's telling me things, like I said, I think he was having fun with me, telling me, like, don't look people in the eye and all this stuff. And yeah, I've never been in, like, a bad neighborhood somewhere or whatever you want to call it. So I'm taking it seriously, like, oh my gosh, I could get killed out here or something. This is scary stuff, serious stuff. So I took him at his word. I wouldn't look at anybody in the eye until we were knocking on the door. And we come to this house, and remember, I'm, not the outgoing type. And there's this house, and it's got this little fence, and he's like, okay, you're up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do you mean I'm up, Like, yeah, you go knock on the door and talk to him. So I'm terrified inside. I have no idea what to expect. So we get out of the car, and I'm walking up to this door, and my legs feel like jello because I'm not outgoing, as I've mentioned already. Get up to the door, and I go and I knock on this door, and we stand there, and nothing happened. Nobody came to the door. So it ended up I didn't have to do anything, but that was the beginning of this a little bit over 2-year adventure over there in California. And the experiences that I would have. So I was assigned to all kinds of things. Like this church has people from all over the world in it. And for whatever reason, they decide that even in the United States, if there's a group of people from a certain culture, they'll have their own congregations sometimes. And one of the first congregations that I was assigned to happened to be a Tongan ward. Tongan. I've learned some words. I haven't used them in so long, but I can give it a try. The Tongan greeting and malo lele, and what an experience that was. I had never even heard of like Polynesian islands. I knew about Hawaii. That was about the extent of it. But the Polynesian islands. I didn't know anything about their culture, none of it, but I got thrown into the middle of it, and I loved every minute of my time over there with those Tongans. You'd have to imagine going to church. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I guess they just sing beautifully. So you go to the church, and they're just, like normally in this church, everybody sings on Sunday it's like a regular church. You go in and they have hymns or whatever. But typically when you go and you have people singing the hymns, they're not like skilled, singers or anything. So it's just off key, and people are kind of singing quiet so that you really can't hear how bad of singers they are, but not in this place. No, you go into this congregation and it's like the most beautiful choir, and everybody just knows right where to sing their part of the song, and it's just the most amazing thing. And the food, my goodness, I've never eaten so well in my life. This was my very first experience with another culture, and it was a very incredible experience. I could go on and on about Polynesian cultures, because I also served in a Samoan ward, and I've got friends. I was assigned to work with someone who was from Fiji, an incredible person who became a professional professional rugby player later on after he was finished with things, but just incredible experiences. Now, later on, I was also assigned to work in a Cambodian branch, they called it, and work with Cambodian people. And this is, this is how sheltered, or how would you call it? I really had no experience with the outside world. I mean, I know about Japan from anime and China from Chinese food, but I'd never heard of Cambodian anything. So the guy that I was assigned to, and then being assigned to this Cambodian branch, this was a really interesting thing, and I still have a great appreciation for Southeast Asian cultures to this day because of that. It completely changed a lot of my own, I guess you'd call it mind expanding sort of experiences, just being involved with these cultures. You'd have to see one of their weddings. Very obviously different than the typical American wedding with the white dresses and whatnot. It involves a sword and different things. I don't want to get into all of it, but that really started me on this adventure. I can't even begin to tell you, if I hadn't gone to California on this mission, as we called it, then I never would have gone to China. I never would have gone anywhere. Excuse me. I'd probably still be in my parents' basement playing video games to this day, just working. I would like to hope that I wouldn't be in my parents' basement, but I just don't see what would have brought about the kind of growth that I've experienced since that time. I also had some pretty scary experiences over there. Excuse me, let me get a drink real quick here. I mentioned that I spent a long time in Compton, and, Compton was also eye-opening in another way. I mentioned in the last video that once you really get to talk to people from other places or other cultures or different ethnicities, you find out that deep down they really are the same. And I felt it was really unfortunate that they were, especially for the children that were growing up in these circumstances, that there were people telling them that this was their only hope. So and you know what? People are very enterprising, and I know things like drug dealers and that sort of thing, that's a really bad sort of thing to do. But I in some ways, I really feel that these politicians that are telling people that they have no hope of doing anything, in life, that they're going to be held down by discrimination or whatnot, that they're somewhat responsible for people that get involved with that, because there really are people that are they have a lot of ingenuity. They're very enterprising, and they want to get themselves out of that position, out of that situation, their families out of that situation, and they don't see any other option, but they see this very dangerous and destructive way of maybe getting themselves out of it. And like I said, I know it's horrible because it destroys lives, but I see these people, and they're just going to do whatever they have to. And because they believe that they have no other way, then they get involved in things they probably never would have otherwise. And so it's another way that I feel disgusted whenever I hear these politicians talking in that way. But Compton was an eye-opening place. I still to this day don't know how that city operates. They don't have a police force. I know they have elections because while I was there, I used to see the signs for the different positions, but you'd see the strangest things walking around in Compton. It's the only place in the city where I ever encountered people on horseback, in some kind of inner city cowboys, riding around on horses in the middle of Compton, or the most delicious fried chicken I've ever had. There's this restaurant, and biscuits. The biscuits are really what drew me to it. And being, having grown up in the South, this fried chicken and biscuits are a big deal. Wow, it's a place called Honey's Kettle. I don't know if it's still there to this day, but if it is, I would, even if it means going into this place, into Compton, I would, recommend going just to get the biscuits and the chicken. It's the best you'll ever have. Delicious beyond belief. But really, spending all that time there in Compton, it was eye-opening, like I said, because I discovered the inner city people are really the exact same as the people in rural Virginia, where I was from. You have all of the same kinds of problems. There's poverty, there's people on welfare, there's drug problems. There's also the vast majority of people that just want better. They want to be good people. They go to church every Sunday. They want to work, that sort of thing. They're good, solid, down-to-earth people. And I know from the people on Gab that came after me that some people think that they're all just a bunch of freeloaders and drug addicts and whatnot, and that's just not the case. I mean, you'd have to actually go there and talk to them, and I know it's dangerous, and there's a lot of resentment on their side too because of what these politicians have been telling them, that, white people are oppressing them and all of this stuff, and really that's a big lie. They're just being, certainly there are some white people that are oppressing them, but it's the politicians telling them they're oppressed that are actually the ones oppressing them. And those same politicians are also scaring all of the people elsewhere to think that, Anyway, that's another story. Just needless to say, Compton was a very eye-opening place. I also saw people that were coming over to the United States as immigrants. And, as an immigrant from a poor country, you don't really have a lot of money or anything to land on your feet when you come to the United States sometimes. So they would end up in these places. There was what was the place called? I want to say it's Park Village. I'd have to think of the name, but there were a lot of Samoan people that ended up in this place. And I just remember thinking how unfortunate that this is where they end up landing in the United States, in this horrible place. There were good people there. There was a lot of obstacles that, especially for their children growing up in this place, I just felt there was a lot of obstacles to overcome. And I thought how unfortunate that that's the way that it has to be, and it should be different. But I know that that's the immigrant story anyway. They always end up, it's a hard struggle. It's a hard climb but people are willing to do it because they want to have something better. And that's what the United States is supposed to stand for. Of course, you and I know that things today are a little bit different than they have been in the past, unfortunately. I also saw some things that have really stuck with me in a negative way to this day. I remember there was a kid that we used to go and visit with because he'd joined the church, and maybe he didn't always have a ride, so we'd go and talk to them. I say a kid, he was graduating from high school, but we'd go and talk to him, and one night his cousin or somebody was there, and he comes in and they're talking about, I guess, hey, this 14-year-old kid just got shot because of some drug dealing stuff. And I just remember thinking about that a 14-year-old being involved in drug trafficking and then getting killed, how terrible it was. And it turned out later that his cousin may have been involved in the crime. It just terrible to think about that people at such a young age would be caught up in something like that. But like I said, that has to do with the kind of oppression that we're talking about, where someone is told they don't have a chance in life. Well, they're going to find a chance. And unfortunately, sometimes it leads to very negative outcomes. But California. And living by the ocean, eating fresh seafood, fresh food. I still love the environment there over in the Southern California. I remember encountering a guy while I was there that had done exactly what I was doing. But when it came time to go home afterward, he was from Utah. I guess he went home, and the first winter, he's like, nope, I'm done with winter. And he moved back to California and had been there for like 30 or 40 years. I can understand why someone would do that. The environment in Southern California is incredible, even though there's a lot of smog. And Los Angeles certainly has a lot of smog. I remember for the first 3 months, you couldn't see any. I mean, the horizon is just brown. And then one day it rained, and we went out, and I could see that suddenly, like, we're surrounded by mountains, And I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize there were mountains. I guess you just couldn't see it through the smog. But yeah, that's what I was doing in California. And I've probably talked, let's see, how long have I been talking here? If I've got a timer, about 20 minutes. There's so much more to this story, just so many experiences that I had. This was my first real encounter with Chinese people, with Koreans. I had never heard of kimchi. Oh, this is another story. I'm going to go ahead and tack this one on there. So I had this guy that I worked with, and he had spent some time as a kid. I guess his family had lived in Korea, and he'd even learned to like rap in Korean, but he was always talking about kimchi. And one time in our area, we encountered some Korean people, and kimchi, I don't know if any of you, well, some of you probably know what it is. It's essentially fermented cabbage with spices on it. It's really strong, the flavor. But he was always talking about kimchi, and he, for whatever reason, we encountered this Korean family, and he decided that that was a good opening to talk about kimchi and to tell them how much he missed kimchi. So the Korean family, being the nice people that they were, they're like, oh, they go and they get this plastic dish, and the next thing we know, we're being handed this great big Tupperware dish full of kimchi. And yeah, it turns out that the guy hated kimchi. And what a waste. But I guess he got to talk to some Korean people, and he was thrilled to be able to show them that he could do the Korean rap and all of that stuff because of living there when he was a kid. But kimchi, that was my first encounter with kimchi. I can eat it. I can handle pretty much whatever. And that's probably also because of my mission. My time there as a minister in California, eating things that most people probably had never considered eating before because of all the different cultures that I ended up being around. I think that really prepared me for going to China and the different kinds of foods that they have there. But that's the story. I finished the 2 years and got on a plane and went back to Virginia and started working and going to school, and eventually got a chance to go over to China. And then I went back again and again and again, and then I stayed a long time, and the rest is history. And here we are today. I'm in the United States again telling you this story. So anyway, we'll go ahead and end it with that. If you want to follow me on any other social media, just remember I've got the links in the description for Parler, Gab, and Twitter and Instagram if you want to follow what's happening with my son and my wife and our little adventures as a family. I post pictures there. Don't forget, you can send me an email to let me know anything you want to know about, any questions you have, or anything you'd like me to talk about, just to get my perspective. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I do have my own personal perspective, and I'd like to hear yours too, so be sure to leave them in the comments down below. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next one.
ไฟพะวงหลงเฝ้าสาวเจ้าบางประกงทางไว้งงหลงเกอหาโอเวรกรรมจำพรากจากไปไกลตา